Baruch Feigenbaum, who will be talking about vehicle automation, political considerations, and dynamics. And what I think, you know, if you listen to me talk a little bit earlier, I kind of described the lay of the land, current legislative and regulatory developments. Baruch is going to try to divine some of these broader political trends and what this means for automated vehicles in the future, which there's a lot of debate about this, but I think Baruch is up for the challenge. Baruch?
All right. So thanks very much, Mark. So as Mark has mentioned, the autonomous vehicles have become suddenly a very popular topic. In one of this morning's breakout sessions, for those of you who are in this room, Mark had a presentation on autonomous vehicles, and Randall was talking sort of about the future of transit and how that fits in with autonomous vehicles. And I originally wasn't going to talk about autonomous vehicles because I thought we had enough speakers, but a combination of other things not falling into place and also all of the interest that we had this morning sort of caused me a little bit to pull out one of my older presentations. And it's titled, perhaps not the best title, Realistic Predictions for Automated Vehicles. Mark and Randall said a lot of what I hope happens. However, I have been in some Transportation Research Board meetings. I've been to the MPOs, which are the planning organizations. I like to say I go to those meetings so you folks don't have to. Yeah, they can be lots and lots of fun. So, and I want to give what I think is the realistic what's going to happen, because government is going to get involved and we're going to have all these dumb things happen. My point is, at the end of the presentation, I want to show you the two paths this could go on, and I want everyone here in the audience, on stage, in the audience, in the bathrooms, out in the hallways talking, to get involved in your states. One of the reasons why Georgia didn't pass stupid laws is because our state think tank, Georgia Public Policy Foundation, and I and some other folks were working to make sure they don't pass dumb laws. If you look at the state of California, obviously we didn't have near that success. Have they come out with their regulations yet, Mark, or are they still developing them?
Just manufacturer testing.
Just manufacturer testing. We're still waiting for the regulations. They were supposed to be out like 2 years ago, and we're still waiting. Okay, so let me go ahead and go forward with the presentation outline here. Overview of the different technologies, what I call a top-down versus bottom-up approach, and which one's going to win. What I consider to be a realistic scenario in 2030, not what I think should happen, but what I think based on where we're going will happen. Effects on the differing modes, and then talking to officials, and which also helps making policy. 30 years ago, we had this Back to the Future movie. It was the anniversary a couple weeks ago. You probably saw it. You may remember they predicted a lot of things about the future, including flying cars. We don't have flying cars. I say this because all of these predictions about the future and guesses are just that, guesses. They're educated guesses. I talk to folks. I hopefully come up with some things. We get feedback from officials, but we really don't know what's going on. If I really was able to forecast the future 30 years from now, I wouldn't be in this business. I would be in, stocks or something where I would actually make real money. Okay, so anyway, a few definitions here for those of you who have not in this area. Vehicle to vehicle, which is the wireless exchange of data among vehicles traveling in the same vicinity. Vehicle to infrastructure, basically the same thing, but instead of being between different vehicles, it's between vehicles in this roadside infrastructure. DSRC, Dedicated Short Range Communications, is one communication method that the folks at NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, whose little banner logo you can see there on the right at the bottom, really like. They like it because basically they want to choose something now, and even though a lot of experts have told them that this is not going to be the best technology, it's probably going to be obsolete in 20 years, well, government doesn't really care about that. They want certainty. And then there's also debates between the ITS folks and the automakers who want this and other folks who want to open up the wireless spectrum. The ITS folks have had this spectrum for 15 years and haven't done much of anything. And as you know, wireless spectrum is very much in demand now. And as I mentioned, we basically have, with NHTSA, it's all about safety. There are actually other potential benefits to this technology, but they're not really interested in those. They're interested in the safety aspects. So I want to talk about what I consider the two different approaches here. What I would consider the old school automakers, and I would also put the government sort of in this mix, and what I would consider the technology innovators. So the old school automakers are GM, Toyota, and Mercedes. And I think this whole philosophy has to do with how they make money. The old school automakers like this top-down vision. They like this rigid structure. They like mandates because they're used to mandates. And in fact, mandates can help lock out new innovative companies, new innovative automakers who might want to compete with them. They also need to connect to other vehicles, sort of because it's their mindset, and also because I think they don't necessarily have the technology in order to do it the Google way. Whereas Google, very much bottom up, limited structure with a focus more on innovation. They don't like mandates. There is actually technology for out there, and depending on who you talk to, and Mark and Randall know all these folks, but you don't even need this sort of vehicle to infrastructure type of stuff, the 5.9 gigahertz. You can actually do things with your cell phone, with the current cellular networks, with ATSM technology, and some sort of backup in your car that would actually have a lot of these technologies. And we might not be quite there now, but we'll be there in a few years. But again, if your whole thing is about safety, or your whole thing is about your version of safety, you don't really care about the best technology. At least that's my opinion. People are always asking me about Google's thought process, and I really have no idea what Google thinks, but based on websites and other things, I'm going to give this a go. My view is that they're supremely confident, maybe a little bit too confident. They do transportation products. Many of us have used Google Earth and Google Maps. The smartphone applications are wonderful. Obviously, there's a profit motive there in terms of selling you stuff and collecting your data and all the rest of it. Google also has this continual fear of becoming too corporate. They actually spun, Google is now called Alphabet in their internal things. In an Alphabet, there is a Google X, which is actually what does the self-driving vehicles. And this is because Google thought that the regular Google was becoming too corporate. So to give you an idea of how non-corporate, non-traditional they want to be, because that's what they're used to, and they think that actually leads to innovation. So in terms of government policy, we talked about the V2V. I think the automakers like V2V, even though I may have some issues with it. The automakers definitely don't like the V2I, that's the vehicle to infrastructure. You can see with these bottom pictures here, the idea is you've got this one device on your road, and then it's communicating with, of course, your train. We have to have a train here. And then buses and cars. I'm surprised there's not some bicyclists here. We'll figure out some way to include them. And also, I put in these circles. Typically, we see circles everywhere because with automated vehicles, because everything obviously goes in a circle. So I was able to find some presentations without circles. But again, this controversy over the 5.9 gigahertz spectrum, a threat of a lawsuit, I think, by some of the ITS people if they don't get the whole spectrum. The NHTSA folks have basically said we're open to sharing the spectrum, but they basically say we're open to sharing it if it works, which in other words means if there's no issues with interference, which I'm skeptical of. So this could be very interesting. And the reason I bring this up is because this mix is basically going to lead to what I call both top-down and bottom-up approaches, which I think is going to be quite a mess, but I do think that's where we're headed. I want to talk about one thing. There's been a lot of talk about congestion, and how is congestion going to be affected by automated vehicles? And the answer is it's really quite complicated, and I want to spell out these two different approaches here by looking at roadway capacity. So with your traditional top-down, NHTSA-favored, old-school automakers, assuming they get this V2V, V2I, and DSRC, which I think is going to take them to like 2050, because they're going to have to put V2I on every road in every state in the entire country, and how much is that going to cost, and how is that a useful investment? You could get a 200% increase, meaning for every stretch of road where you have one vehicle, you could have three. However, because I think it's going to take forever to implement all of this stuff, we're not looking at it until 2070. I don't know about you, I don't think I'm going to be alive in 2070, and I'm probably one of the younger people in this room. So, whereas Google, if we go forward with Google cars right now, they will actually reduce capacity somewhat, and that is because Google cars are safer in a fully automated mode than humans are, which is actually probably a good idea if you've seen the way some people drive. So right now we wouldn't get that increase in capacity, but with technologies that are going to be developing, we will down the road. but it's two sort of different approaches, not necessarily one going to lead to it any faster than the other, two different approaches to get to the same place. I think the biggest variable that actually influences automation is this big green dollar sign, which is why it's so big. Right now, we have these wonderful Tesla vehicles. Well, I have some issues depending on what the power plant is in your state of whether they're so wonderful. But assuming you're like John Niles and you get to live in a nice green state with hydroelectric power, you've got these nice Tesla vehicles. But they are $70,000, and most Americans can't afford it. And even those that can't afford it are not necessarily going to spend $70,000 on a car, because there's other things they may want to spend that money on. So until automated vehicles have a realistic price, we're not going to see them widespread. You've also got the average age of the vehicle on the road. People tend to keep their vehicles longer. Many people keep them 20 years. Some on this panel keep them 30 years or even longer. That may be.
It turned out to be only 29.
It was only 29. I'm sorry, only 29. The attractiveness, whether people see value in automated technologies, and then early technologies sort of move down the scale with affluence. I want to show my crazy concerns. I first actually used this face in Washington State because of the legalized marijuana, and I said, you know, if you had too much of this, maybe this is what you look like. I don't know. Maybe you look like something else. But I found it to be pretty popular. And this is a lot of stuff you see in the popular press. Many of these things may happen. Some of them will definitely happen, but they're not going to happen next year. And that's what I want to push. Full mobility for children and seniors. So in other words, you'll put your child in the car and they'll arrive at the daycare and you don't have to take them. Going to be a long time. Prohibitions on manual driving. I think there's been some fears raised that you're not going to be able to drive your car in automated mode. I personally do not think that is going to happen for a very long time. If you don't want your automated car in automated mode right now, all you do is turn the automated feature off. It's a button. Eliminating crashes, emergency room traffic fine revenue will decrease crashes. Automated vehicles are still going to crash. Sorry, software is not going to be perfect. So elimination's not happening. Drastically reducing car sales and parking, I think will reduce car sales somewhat. Some people like me are always going to want to own their own vehicle. I think the possibility of like government owning vehicles and doing some sort of rationing has got to be the scariest thing I've heard of in a long time. So I very much think we are not going there. I don't think even the folks on the left necessarily want to go there. Drastically reducing vehicle weight, solving limited roadway capacity. I talked about that before. Eliminating fixed route transit. We will get to eliminating fixed route transit, but it's not going to be in 2 years. It's going to take some time, and it's going to be especially the buses. It's not going to be the rail lines in Manhattan. And then revolutionizing land use, which I hope we never get there. I will tell you, a lot of the MPOs look at this as a way to change land use, and they get very excited about it. And so I come to their conference, because they want to force people to live in, their wonderful new urbanist developments. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't going to happen for a while, and they get very depressed. Kind of makes me happy. But anyway, that's just me. Realistic automation scenario in 2030. I believe we're going to have what I consider level 4 of 5 out of the SAE chart. And I'm going to get to that in a minute so you can see what it is. What it means is each individual driving task is going to be automated, but the car cannot do all of them at the same time. So there'll be automated execution and steering, automated monitoring of the driving environment, automated fallback performance of the driving task, but the car won't be able to integrate them all together. And that is very important because it means the human being is still going to need to take control of the vehicle and cannot then sleep. Would they be able to read? Well, people do that right now. But would they be able to read safely or text safely? Maybe, but they're still going to have to be alert. Where is this going to happen? Campus zones, limited access highways. There's some real challenges with urban streets. If we do this V2I stuff, there's going to be all kinds of problems with rural streets. And so the result is humans are going to need to take control, and there's going to be mix between automated, not automated, partially automated vehicles. It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Here's the SAE chart. I'm going to pull up right here. You can see this level 4, which is the second one from the bottom, is what I'm talking about in terms of automation. So you've got a lot of these individual tasks automated, but not all of the driving modes. Right now, the latest cars that are being developed that stop themselves and have the lane departure systems are at level 2. There is a big jump between level 2 and level 3. And that's one of the things, and as I think Mark alluded to this morning, the automakers don't like level 3. They like to go right from level 2 to level 4. It's kind of why Google envisions when they get their fully automated vehicle, it's going to be fully automated. They're not stopping with these partial steps because these partial steps introduce a lot of issues. Let's talk about the near to midterm effects and just some of these things here I've touched on, so I'm going to go over this really quickly. Type of technology chosen and speed. Type of technology means bottom up or top down are a big issue. Land use is another factor, often a negative factor in terms of urban growth boundaries. I say it is a factor because if you're like me and you live in Atlanta, where we have a very permissive land use, you are probably going to have different effects from automated vehicles than if you're in Seattle, where you've got some fairly strict urban growth boundaries, and the people who plan have some ideas about where they'd like you to live. Congestion is also going to vary. We have what's called recurrent, and I actually, let's see, I think I got this right. Recurrent, the routine overloading at peak period times versus non-recurrent, which happens due to incidents. Keep that in mind for the next slide. And then there's transit. Replacing, as Randall said, the rail systems and the line haul are less likely. The spoke patterns in terms of the buses, particularly paratransit, all that stuff should be fairly easy. You see my sort of, the two pictures here of recurrent and non-recurrent congestion. You can see in this top picture, not only is it recurrent congestion and weaving and all kinds of things going on, evidently everyone in this town drives a vehicle painted white. It's a very interesting place. And here, I don't know if you've ever been, I was on I-35 yesterday, and they had some lanes closed, and that's what I thought the sign felt like. Said, ha ha, you'll never get to work on time. It's kind of what I thought it said. Hopefully that's not actually what it did say. I think the best opportunity for automated vehicle early deployment is going to be commercial vehicles and trucks. And the reason is you have sort of a perfect mix of factors that are going to lead to this. First of all, you've got right now a shortage of drivers, in part because trucking companies don't want to pay drivers that much, and in part because truck drivers not really the most fun living you can have out there. Most car drivers hate trucks because they're big and they think they don't drive well and all the other things, and they go slow and they're in the left lane and they're slowing you down. It's really annoying. So there's a public policy issue here and some incentives to try to solve this problem. The truck fleet is relatively small and it's expensive to get a new vehicle. So this is relatively attractive because you can have some replacements, and because the truck vehicle is so important to the business, it's kind of a better investment than it is for you and I to buy a new car. The technology is very close to existing. I'll tell you, the National Academy of Sciences is doing some testing right now on truck platooning, where conceivably you wouldn't have drivers in trucks one day. We're not there yet, don't worry, but we may get there. And then there's also the discussion of dedicated truck lanes. Right now, the state of Florida, on a stretch of I-595, which is in South Florida, is trying to encourage some testing of automated vehicles. They've got 3 hot lanes, which at least one of which is not needed, and that's sort of a political thing, but we're already seeing this being tested or soon to be tested today. Okay, so now time for the predictions. What to expect roadways. So I mentioned fleet turnover. Because of this, I think there's going to be a relatively small decrease in vehicle ownership. I don't think the big decrease is going to happen until 2030 or 2040. A lot of people think I'm very pessimistic on this, and they might be right. We'll see. I think a moderate decrease in parking needs. There's sort of this idea by some folks that, oh, we can get rid of parking and we'll just be wonderful and magical and cars will disappear. Even to the extent you remove parking from the urban center, it's still going to be parking around the city's edge, which is actually going to increase your VMT, which those same people don't like. So I don't quite know about that theory. I do think there's some demand, there's some real possibility at the work time of decreasing parking, more because of Uber and casual car sharing and some of the technologies. But I do think this is a better potential up first. We're going to have, because of what I mentioned, the recurrent and non-recurrent, we're going to have a moderate increase in congestion. And the recurrent congestion, that should actually say, is going to increase, and the non-recurrent is going to decrease because the accidents will go down. And again, automated vehicles, far more cautious than human drivers. Okay, I have to put in this transit slide. I know, I'm sorry, but I have to give this to these planning people, and I have to talk about transit or I get shot. Okay, so here we go. The continued development of major transit system. I am very worried very, very worried that rail systems that we increasingly don't need, even less than we need them today, if that makes sense to you, are going to be built because there's a lot of incentives. I am hoping that automated vehicle can serve as a way to decrease the construction of these expensive rail systems, but I don't know if it's that simple because I think it's more likely that the local bus service gets cut because that serves the less dense areas. I still think these bus cutbacks are a little, further off, maybe to 10 years. But I think all major areas should stop building capital investment rail projects and expensive bus projects, especially for those that aren't going to be completed until 2030. And I actually say this at other conferences, and sometimes I get looks. Moderate increase in casual ride sharing, car sharing, substituting. We've had some discussions about Uber, Lyft2Go, Chariot, which is a private bus service. I think the technology is really bringing this along, and I think it's actually quite encouraging. I am just hopeful that the politics of the situation doesn't force us to fund these transit services that we no longer need. But I am not optimistic that we will be able to change that. And a brief little discussion on other modes. I am not the biggest advocate for cycling and walking. I think it gets too much funding, and I've got issues because people don't actually take it to commute. However, there is cycling and walking in the central parts of some cities. And to the effect that people are like, automated vehicles, are there going to be safety issues with cyclists and walkers? If there are, because of the power of the cycling and walking lobby, automated cars are never going to go anywhere. This has to be a solution that's solved. And to give you challenges about all of the things, to give you an idea, of all the challenges of automated vehicles, if you're a human, you've got depth perception and you can see things coming. If you're an automated vehicle, you need to be able to predict what a light rail or a streetcar vehicle is going to be able to do. You need to be able to predict what a bicyclist or pedestrian is going to be able to do. You need to be able to predict what the crazy driver who's texting on their cell phone and applying their makeup or lipstick, whatever else they're applying, probably part of makeup, is going to be able to do. So these are hard things. This is not simply a machine that you can teach these things. Cars, you cannot beta test your cars like Microsoft beta tests its software. And I get their latest version of Word and it crashes. And I get very annoyed because I lost a report. Well, if the cars are beta tested, people could die. That's a bigger problem, especially when you're talking about liability and insurance and public acceptance, which is one of the reasons why I'm sort of skeptical on a lot of these timetables. I would also say we have a possibility of automated vehicles to making commute more tolerable. Will that mean people will be willing to commute further distances? Oh, some of the planner types really hate this, but I think it's very possible. We also have right now telecommuters outnumbering transit users. As commuting becomes more tolerable, will that go down or up? I don't know. I think the big thing and the point I want to end on, oh wait, one more slide. One of the things I want to say is that the bigger mode changes will happen, but we're talking about 2030 to 2050 until they happen, not tomorrow. The last slide I want to say is this is why you need to become involved. This is, in my opinion, one of the big chances we have right now to influence public policy. You know all the crummy policy we have with transit and rail? You know why it's crummy? Is because it's there, and it's very hard to change bad policy. Much harder to change bad policy than to get it right in the first place. So if you are like me, and since you're at this conference, I think you probably share some of my viewpoints, you would agree that the bottom-up Google approach with as little government involvement as possible is the way we want to go. And if you think that way, I would encourage you to get involved. Oh, the federal level, it's like an immovable object of craziness. You talk to the NHTSA people about the vehicle to infrastructure and the DSRC. Even some of them don't like it. They won't say it publicly, but they don't like it. States, the enabling drivers legislation, the state DOTs, AASHTO is getting involved in this. The state driver's license folks, they're getting involved in this. This is an opportunity. And of course, at the local level, I personally think the states are the ones who should be making this policy. That can be a little contradictory with sort of our, local always knows best. But because the states set motor vehicle licensing, I just think that's the best and logical place. Thank you.